Thank you. Well, dear everybody, dear ambassadors, dear friends, dear colleagues, online and here physical. I'm Per Christer Lund, Science and Technology Counselor at the Norwegian Embassy, Innovation Norway, and I will be your MC tonight. On behalf of the organizers, which is Business Sweden, Business Iceland, Innovation Norway, the Danish Embassy, the Finnish Embassy, and Nordic Innovation House, I have the great pleasure of welcoming you to yet another Nordic Green event here in Singapore. This year's event is a Nordic Talks with the theme of green transitions and energy resilience. And it is part and supported by the Nordic Talks, by the Nordic Council of Ministers. So I'd like to introduce the agenda for today. We'll have the opening address by Ambassador Sandra Jensen Landi, Ambassador of Denmark to Singapore. We'll have an exciting panel under the title of Navigating Energy Resilience and Greener Future in the Nordics, Southeast Asia. Very strong, good panel. There is an opening for Q&A. Please use your Slido app. Put it on your computer, and there is a QR code on each table. So please enter your Q&As or your comments into the Slido, and Yatin will pick them up during the panel. So it's a Slido, and this is then the hashtag Nordic Green 2022. After the panel, we'll have some closing remarks from my ambassador, Ambassador Homme of Norwegian, and then we'll end the online session, and then we'll have a networking and pre-dinner drinks, and dinner then from 6:30 or 6. You have to be here 6:30. Dinner will be served 6:45. Use also the opportunity in between to mingle and connect with some of the companies that we have invited to have their presentations in the back of this room. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce the keynote speaker, which is Her Excellency Sandra Jensen Landi, Ambassador of Denmark to Singapore, to give us the introduction to this event.
Thank you very much, Per Christer. Honored guests, excellencies, esteemed speakers, ladies, gentlemen, everyone else who don't feel encaptured by that, everyone who's online, everyone who's in the room. On behalf of the Nordic ambassadors, I'm very pleased to bid you all a very warm welcome to this year's Nordic Green Talk. The event today has been made possible in this partnership that Per Christer has already talked about between the various trade offices and the Nordic Innovation House and the Nordic Embassies, and with funding from the Nordic Talks. We have all been looking forward to this event today. It has become an annual tradition, and we are aiming at keeping it so. So thank you for being here and for supporting our event. Tonight, we would like to highlight Nordic strongholds in the energy sector. We want to share our experiences about our green transitions and our strive for energy resilience. There's no doubt that right now, energy security is one of the highest priorities for European nations. With Russia's unlawful invasion of Ukraine and their military aggressions, that has brought immense suffering to the Ukrainian people, first of all, but it has also thrown Europe and to a large extent the whole world into an energy crisis. The pressure for supplying electricity to all of Europe is high right now. Not only are we looking for solutions that are independent from Russian gas, but also solutions that are resilient, sustainable, and we're looking for these solutions now. Sustainability is a major concern in the Nordic countries. Ever since the former Norwegian Prime Minister Gro Harlem Brundtland authored a UN report on global sustainability. It came out all the way back in 1987, as you might have remembered. Sustainability has grown to become a stronger and stronger part of our way of thinking in the Nordic countries. Industries are changing their production methods, and what was seen as waste is now becoming resources in circular economies. Our citizens are also changing their lifestyles and their patterns of consumption, which again creates incentives for producers to produce in a more sustainable manner. So basically, sustainability is today at the core of how we innovate, how we produce, and how we plan. But we can and we must still do more. And that's why the Nordic prime ministers decided in 2019 that by 2030, and you have it up here, the Nordic region will become the most sustainable and integrated region in the world. This vision consists of 3 priorities: a green Nordic region. Together we will promote a green transition of our societies and work towards carbon neutrality and a sustainable, circular and bio-based economy. There's a competitive Nordic region, which is at the top there, which is about how we will promote green growth in the region based on knowledge, based on innovation, mobility and digital integration. And we also want a socially sustainable Nordic region. We don't give up on our Nordic model. We want to promote an inclusive, an equal, and an interconnected region with shared values and strengthened cultural exchange and welfare. So that's what we're standing on, this strong commitment. And the Nordic countries have already gone a long way when it comes to transitioning from fossil fuels to more renewable energy sources. Today, we are at 40% of our gross domestic energy consumption that is covered by renewable energy. Finland and Sweden, they have vast forests that provide abundant resources for biofuels. In Norway and Iceland, there's geothermal, there's hydroelectric sources that provide up to 70% of the nation's energy. It's very impressive. And in Denmark, we currently cover around 40% of our electricity by wind. But these natural resources, they tend to fluctuate. Definitely the wind does. And so we depend very heavily on our neighbors. So together we have created this Nordic power system where hydro, nuclear and wind power are our main energy sources. So our interconnected energy supply system allows us to export and to import depending on what situation we have. So in Denmark, when the wind blows a lot, we export our energy, and when it doesn't, we import hydropower from Norway. This exchange happens through our marketplace. It's called Nord Pool, where we trade electricity actually by the hour. The interconnected energy system and marketplace have provided the Nordic countries with some of the highest level of energy security in Europe, as well as one of the most cost-efficient systems. We are very happy about that system. So the percentage of renewable energy has already increased in the Nordics, but it hasn't been at the cost of our economic development. That's one of the concerns we often hear. But we have all experienced economic growth at the same time as we have reduced our emissions. As an example from my own country, since 1980, we have decoupled our economic growth from our energy consumption in Denmark. So in 4 decades, our national GDP has more than doubled, but our energy consumption has only gone up with 6%. And at the same time, actually, when we talk about resources, water consumption has decreased with 40%. And this can only be done because we're not only looking at the supply side, changing our energy sources to more renewable sources, but also on the demand side, looking at energy efficiency and changing the ways we produce and the way we live and the way we consume. So, like Singapore, the Nordic countries have a strong tradition for addressing these societal challenges we're facing in a collaboration between public and private sector. So that's another point I would like to highlight. So in line with this tradition, when Denmark, we had to identify new pathways of how we were going to achieve our goal of becoming 100% fossil-free by 2050, the government invited the industry in. And they made 14 different industry partnerships, public-private partnerships, that had the goal that each had to create green roadmaps designed by and for each industry. So these partnerships have so far come up with more than 400 tangible recommendations to how to lower emissions, how to up the efforts, And the most remarkable idea that I think at least has come out of this is the idea to build an artificial energy island in the North Sea the size of 18 football fields. At first, of course, people thought that idea was absolutely insane. It was perceived as crazy, but somehow people kept working on it. And today it is one of our flagship projects for a green future. It is and now actually we plan to even have 2 islands, not just one. So one will be constructed in the North Sea, another will be built in the Baltic Sea. You have probably heard a lot about the Baltic Sea recently. We had some challenges with our gas pipes there. And in the Baltic Sea, it will be built on an already existing island, Bornholm. The islands, they will harness the power of wind. They will function as hubs, and from each hub, electricity can be distributed more efficiently to the countries surrounding these oceans. The energy islands will be able to supply Danish households for sure with 100% green electricity, but they will also provide green energy to many of our neighbors. In the Baltic Sea alone, it's a 3 gigawatt green energy plan. It will power 3 to 4 million households in Europe. And in the North Sea, the plans are even more ambitious. In the first phase, it will also be 3 gigawatt, but the plan is to go up to 10 gigawatt, and that will power around 10 million households in Europe. So the plan is to harness also the wind for these hard-to-abate sectors. So it's not only the households and the private consumption, but the maritime sector, aviation, long-haul transportation, all of these sectors that we know are very, very challenging to decarbonize. We will do that through power-to-X technologies, green hydrogen, and we're trying to invest in this new technology where all is not yet in place. We still don't have the whole solution, but we're trying to invest and make sure it becomes as efficient and as effective as possible, as soon as possible, of course. D.P. Wong, he mentioned this also in his keynote remarks at the opening of CF yesterday, how Singapore is also betting on green hydrogen being a really key part of the future. And I just want to echo that that's also how we see it in the Nordic countries, and we are trying to make all the investments we can right now. The energy islands, as I mentioned, they are example of private-public partnerships of how crazy ideas can suddenly become concrete plans. And I just want to say that's also basically the same story with our whole wind energy sector. For many, many years, nobody believed in wind. Today, it is one of the cheapest types of power. But it also shows, the energy islands also shows that our governments are ready to make the massive investments in infrastructure and the investments in research and development that are needed. We can't do it alone. We count on many other countries doing the same. They have also been reasons for bringing the Nordic countries and the countries in Northern Europe even closer together in energy collaboration recently. So in August, the countries surrounding the North Sea and the Baltic Sea signed a very ambitious agreement with targets for wind power in the region by 2030, and also plans for establishing large-scale hydrogen production onshore and offshore. At the Baltic Sea Energy Summit that was held in Denmark at the end of August, Germany, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Finland, Sweden, and Denmark, we agreed to go almost at 20 gigawatt offshore wind in the Baltic Sea by 2030. That's 7 times the capacity today. So as you can hear, the ambitions are very high. This is something we really, really prioritize. Last year at the Nordic Green Talk, we were all full of hope. We talked about how we can ensure a green energy transition as well. We were talking about the progress that has been made so far, and all what's still needed to be done, of course, to reach our emission goals. We heard examples from different industry leaders on how and they were working to achieve lower carbon footprints. But in November last year, none of us would have expected what world we would be in today, and that now we are facing a major energy crisis that is not just about sustainability. So let me once again say that with Russia's aggressive and truly unjustifiable invasion of Ukraine, it's having an enormous effect in the Nordic region. Mind you, we are a neighboring region to Russia, and we feel that very intensively these days. We are pretty much changing our policies, changing our procedures by the minute at the moment in response to this. But together with the climate crisis, these are very negative drivers of development, mind you, but we are trying to make sure that they at least drive a positive change. So what is helping us through this crisis at the moment is our existing access to renewable energy, our interconnected system, our collaboration, and that's what makes us stronger and more resilient to face the crisis. So at this year's Nordic Green Talk, we will again hear from industry leaders. We will hear from them from a slightly different perspective than last year. Today, I think everyone feels the urgent need for creating changes, for not just lowering carbon footprint for the climate change, that is also extremely urgent, but also simply to bring our energy costs down. So we need to find new, innovative solutions, and we need it maybe tenfold more than last year. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing the perspectives on energy solutions, on research, on innovation, on investments, and how we can all move forward from here on this important agenda from our panels today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ambassador Landi, for taking us through the situation in the Nordics, and also to draw lines here. Nordics are, I think the success that you're alluding to is also our integration, how we have been working together. We have connected our grids, we have connected our energy systems. It shows a bit of resilience, and I think that is under stress testing right now in Europe and in the Nordics. So we'll see how that plays out, our market. But thank you so very much for this introduction. I'm very pleased to now introduce the panel under the title of Navigating Energy Resilience and Greener Future in the Nordics and Southeast Asia, as a follow-up of what Ambassador Landi was talking about, but also to draw the lines and the reflections and the relevance into this region. Again, I'd like to mention about the Slido that you have on your table, and also you online. Please use the Slido to enter your questions and your comments, and then Yatin will pick them up during or after the panel. I have the pleasure of introducing the panel moderator, Mr. Yatin Premchand, Managing Director, Global Advisory, Black & Veatch, an old colleague from DNV. I'm very happy that you are moderating this great panel. I'd like to call upon Mr. Leena Mattilainen, Head of APAC Innovation Center from Neste, Asia Pacific. Then Mr. Haukur Hardarson, if that was pronounced correctly. Perfect. Chairman and founder of Arctic Green Energy of Iceland. Or, I mean, you're not, you're all over the place, but it's Icelandic. Great. And then, last but not least, Mr. Prashant Mishra, Global Head M&S Switchgear of Hitachi Energy. So with that, I leave the word to you, Yatin.
You can hear me? Yes, of course. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this opportunity to moderate this session. I think we've got some very unique companies here that are sort of at the forefront, if you will, of energy transition, bringing not only fuels but technologies as well as advisory and the build side of enablement. Just a quick background. So what we'll just do is we'll go one by one and we'll just introduce our firms. I'm from Black & Veatch. My name is Yatin Premchand. I'm Managing Director of our Global Advisory arm. Black & Veatch is better known for our EPC expertise across oil and gas, power, water, and a whole host of other sectors. In Asia, we've moved quite aggressively into decarbonization and supporting power system transition to green hydrogen, ammonia, renewables, and all the connectivity that goes with that. We also do a lot of work in M&A and supporting technology migration. Are we good? Lena, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me here. So I'm Lena Matilainen. I'm coming from Neste Corporation, working there as head of APAC Innovation Center, brand new center. We just opened in August or moved in. Neste has interesting history of turning conventional oil refinery, small local company to provider of solutions for sustainability and renewables.
Anko?
Yeah, my name is Haukur Harðarson. I'm the chairman and founder of Arctic Green Energy. We are a geothermal company focusing on bringing clean heating and cooling to the cities of the world. We are a bit unusual in the sense that we provide an unbroken chain from exploration through development, and we are also owners and an operating utility where we work. We are currently providing energy to about 70 cities and municipalities around the world. And I think sort of our contribution towards geothermal has been to prove on a massive scale that geothermal is absolutely the best solution when it comes to heat or cool cities where it's available.
Thank you very much. Prashant?
You can hear me now, right? So my name is Prashant. I'm working for Hitachi Energy and formerly ABB. So a strong Swedish connection, I think you should make it clear. We are providing the solutions which are essential to integrate the renewable energy to the power grids. We have a strong product from Hitachi Energy and system offerings which make it possible for the renewable energy to be integrated to make smoother energy transition. I'm working since past 20 years for this company.
Excuse me, can you put the mic a little bit closer?
Is it better?
Maybe you're off.
Is it off?
Yeah, it's off. Let me.
Is it on now? No.
I cannot see either. Just take it off. Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm working for since past 20 years for Hitachi Energy. I worked in several countries, predominantly in Asia. I worked in China for 10 years, in Malaysia, in India, and now I'm based out of Dubai. In Singapore, it's always feeling like home. So it's great to be here and talking to all of you. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Again, I think there's some, there we go. Apologies for that. Lena, I think maybe we can start off with you and looking at how, you know, sustainable aviation fuels, for example, looking at the fuel decarbonization segment as well. I mean, one of the things that I think all of us have started doing again is getting on planes and flying around. And we're going to start seeing that carbon emission profile kind of skyrocketing again. A company like yours, for example, is kind of critically positioned to be able to decarbonize transport in a much bigger way moving forward, right? So how do you see, you know, the sustainable transport fuel segment developing, perhaps leveraging on what you're doing in Europe and in the Nordics back into Asia and the Pacific?
What we are doing, we are having many issues ongoing and thinking that there are many scenarios. How can we actually replace fossil oil, these new solutions? One of those is what we are doing, renewable fuels. And we are doing that for aviation. We are doing that for, we have renewable diesel. We are world leader producing these fuels. Still, we need more. When we are having like a different scenarios there, many studies, calculations, how would world look like in 2040. 2040, we have analyzed some of that data, and well, it could be that by then we can replace about half of that need. So our products, it might be like maybe 2/3 of that. Of course, we need other solutions like electrifying transportation. Still, we need more. Yeah.
Indeed. Thank you very much for that. And Honko, if I may, I mean, you know, looking at Iceland itself, I mean, the first thing that comes to one's mind is volcanoes and glaciers, right? And steam and beautiful scenery and all of that. Looking at the geothermal space, right? I mean, you're leaders in that field. How is the technology that we've known for many years? How is that kind of evolving in terms of applications? And where do you see that kind of going with respect to the energy mix in the decarb world?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right that Iceland, Icelanders have been leaders in geothermal for a long, long time. As a matter of fact, the country is almost 100% draw 100% of its primary energy from renewables, and the geothermal forms a very, very large part of that. But geothermal has been harnessed for a long time in countries like Iceland and New Zealand and Italy, these volcanic countries where you can harness high temperature geothermal. But geothermal is perhaps the least understood of all of the renewables. About 20 years ago, there were maybe 20 countries doing anything interesting, and now all of a sudden you have 140 countries. So we are actually going quite fast into geothermal and developing new technologies. We are drilling deeper. We can use lower temperatures. And I'm sure all of you know about geothermal for generating electricity. That's very valuable, and that has been very valuable to Iceland. But the most valuable aspect of geothermal is the lower temperatures that you can find not only in the volcanic areas, but pretty much in every single country in some form. These lower temperatures of geothermal are ideal for heating and cooling cities. And if you look at how important that is, just imagine the total use of energy around the world every year, all the energy that's used every year. All the world's electricity is less than 20%. But heat is more than half of the energy usage every year. So you can see immediately how important it is to have a solution for heat. And we need to transition heat from fossil fuels. Heat is generated, by the way, 85% by fossil fuels, whether you're in Germany or in China. If we can find ways of transitioning this, we have made a massive contribution to decarbonization. And geothermal happens to be the only renewable that is baseload, so the only renewable that can take on large projects like heating and cooling a whole city without any intermittency. And there is a whole host of interesting technologies that are coming out, probably too short time to go over them here, but just to give you an example what geothermal can do. In Europe, we all see the catastrophe that is going on. Sky-high prices, energy shortage. In the meantime, there is nothing going on in Iceland, and there is nothing going on in these cities that we are providing geothermal to in China. But at the same time, geothermal resources in Europe are at least enough to provide for a third, if not up to half of the population. And these are just the known reservoirs. So, yeah.
So, and that's excluding industry.
That's
right?
the
process.
The figure of heat, yes. The figure of heating, 51% actually includes industry. If you isolate simply the houses, that's about 40% of the total. And houses, building cities, 40%.
It'd be really interesting to know more about how that would be applied in Asia, and we'll get to that in a second.
Yes.
Prashant, I think, I mean, the technology and solutions that you provide, you know, globally, basically are sort of underpinning the technology change in energy, right, and enabling access to energy. A lot of technologies are sort of getting increasingly complicated as well. I think it'd be really interesting to kind of see where those technologies are not only enabling the energy transition, but also looking at, how we can look at energy security and the cost of energy. Because, I mean, there's a lot of debate around saying, yes, we're going to go greener, it's going to cost more, but the ultimate cost is actually our survival, right, at the end of the day. So just getting some inputs from you on where Hitachi is with that and how you're enabling the cost reduction part, but more importantly, energy security.
Yeah. So this is very interesting. What is happening with the energy providers? They are facing three fundamental challenges. The first one is the business model is changing. So earlier the business model was production of energy and then long transmission and consumption. But now we have distributed energy production. So this is the number one challenge with most of the energy providers are facing. Then the second challenge they face comes from the consumer behavior. So for past 100 years, the consumer behavior was different. Now the consumer behavior is changing, is demanding more value addition from where you are supplying your energy. Is it renewable? How you go with the pricing strategy because your loads are variable, right? Yeah. And then the last one, we see the policies from the government. Just to give you an example, in 2018, Europe came with the policies to replace meters with all energy meters, but it was not a comprehensive policy. Because there we were not talking about energy efficiencies targets, and we were also not talking about how we can have demand response, right? So for the energy providers, these are the challenges. But at the same time, we asked them for three fundamental things. Number one is decarbonization. We know, and it's quite inevitable, that electricity will become the backbone of energy system, right? And electrification is the key to decarbonization. So this is the task to decarbonize is on the electricity providers. The second one is decentralization. So we see the power generation is decentralized. You have integration of renewable energy. I think our Excellency Sandra talked about it, that how difficult it is to integrate the renewable energy because it's really, very unstable. You cannot predict the power output. So it's very difficult to match it with the power consumption. A more technical term we use is that integration of renewable energy actually reduces the system inertia to make it more unstable. And unstable leads to the blackouts, right? The last piece of the puzzle is digitalization. So everything we see is related to the digitalization. So if you would like to, now we are talking about renewable energy integration of around 27%. 20 years down the line, it would be 50-60%. With 50 to 60% renewable energy and plus 20% variable renewable energy, you are bound to have significant storage system. But you also need to predict the energy consumption. Therefore, energy providers, electricity provider needs to have a very strong energy management solution. So this is just one piece of challenges they are facing. Now, let's talk about electromobility. We know the electric vehicles, it's growing, and growing, but you cannot wait 8 hours to charge your electric vehicles. You need superchargers. So when you need supercharger, one supercharger is like switching on 70 air conditioning units at the same time. So this is the kind of sudden increase in the demand with the energy provider will face. And it's not so easy for them to predict certain changes, right? So therefore, you need to have the big data, you need to go for the energy management solution. Then comes another critical part. Very interesting for us to know that 40% of the the hacking attempts are actually on the power grids. So we have to make the system resilient from the cybersecurity perspective as well. So we are talking about blockchains. So the energy provider, the electricity provider needs to incorporate the blockchain also in the network, right? So these are the few challenges. I can go on and on about how difficult, more and more difficult it is getting for the electricity provider to comprehend to all these challenges and provide a safer and reliable and sustainable electricity, right? Then come to the second part. So I think with the World Economic Forum, together with Hitachi Energy, we worked out the value system to look at green energy transition. I think it's not possible for us to look in isolation the cost, energy security. However, there are three fundamental pillars. The number one is energy security. And with the current geopolitical situation, with the ongoing war and energy crisis, each country has energy security as topmost priority for them. The second one, we are looking at the recession. So economic growth. We need the opportunities for economic growth. And the last one is the green energy transition. Therefore, these three fundamental pillars, we need to find the ways to balance them out, right? So the critical part for us would be to define the value system which will allow for different geographies with the different energy mix, with the different economic situation, different geopolitical situation to adopt certain solution. So the three core elements what we have defined with World Economic Forum is basically integration of renewable energy, so changing the energy mix towards more renewable energy. The second one is the interconnection, which is very critical. I heard Ambassador of Denmark said that when the renewable energy penetration is 60%, you're depending on your neighbors. So in ASEAN is also very relevant that you have interconnection, you have the ASEAN grid. Then you have integrated energy solutions. So when we talk about the integrated energy solution, is basically this is the pivoting energy transition towards greener energy. So this is the demand response. This is the energy efficiencies. It is not possible to have the renewable energy with 60–70% with very high volatility and not have the demand response and not have the energy efficiencies. You will have to have energy efficiency solutions because this is going to save a lot of capital expenditure for the countries. You will have to incorporate a very strong digitalization so that you can work with the demand response, right? I'm not talking about the electric vehicles plugging itself when it can sense when the electricity prices are minimum, but somehow we need to achieve some sort of demand response. And the penetration we see around 20–25% of the penetration would be really significant. So if we look at three fundamental pillars specific to ASEAN region, we have devised that, number one, we need to find the ways to switch off the coal-fired power plants. And it is not so easy because this is against the energy security of some of the countries, right? However, we need to find the ways to do that. The second fundamental thing we need to do is that we need to think about the interconnection so that we can utilize the renewable energy from different parts, so like connecting Vietnam to Indonesia or to Singapore, etc. The last one would be, for us, it's very, very important, but it's very difficult to achieve, especially in ASEAN region, is to think about digitalization. So probably leapfrogging from the technological perspective, where Nordics are. So they have taken a transition of 10, 15, 20 years, and then understanding how that transition happened and implementing it in ASEAN. So I believe it's a very interesting time ahead for us, and certainly very, very challenging to keep the momentum towards the green energy transition.
Thank you for that. So, Ankur, if we look at what Prashant just said, right? There's energy efficiency, there's energy security, there's stable renewables, right? Greening of the power systems. When looking at the geothermal play, right? I mean, it's not just for power. It can underpin a lot of what he was just talking about with respect, at least in Southeast Asia and parts of Southeast Asia, because of the resource that we have. I mean, Singapore's looking at it now as well. I mean, there's, looking for heating, cooling, process, industry, not just power. Where do you see these kinds of applications actually in ASEAN? And where do you see this market evolving beyond just the power play? And maybe even investments in this space?
Yeah, well, let's first remember that Southeast Asia has the best geothermal reservoir of any region in the world. So just Indonesia alone has, I think 30 or 40% of what is known totally. So this is a fantastic resource here in the region. And the companies here have just started to scratch the surface by using the highest temperature to generate electricity. And there is a lot of room for growth there. But like I said earlier, the most important part of geothermal is maybe its qualities when it comes to heating and cooling, because heating and cooling needs a lot of baseload energy. And the beauty of geothermal is that you don't have to make electricity first to get heating and cooling from it. You can use the hot brine from the ground directly. If you have to generate electricity as an intermediary, you will lose about 80% of the energy content. If you use it directly, you will lose next to none. Now, I often heard the story, I don't know if it's true or not, that one of the leader of Singapore was once asked what is the secret behind Singapore's success, and I think the answer was air conditioning or cooling. But there is a huge market for heating and cooling, and it will grow very, very much over the next decades. If you just take some of the Middle Eastern countries, I know them a little bit. So it's countries like Saudi Arabia, 60% of all the energy that is used in that country every year is for cooling. And we will see the demands for cooling rise tremendously in Southeast Asia over the next decades. As a matter of fact, only 30% of human population lives in areas that need heating. 70% live in areas that need cooling. And geothermal is the ideal solution. It's the only renewable that is baseload. So it doesn't need any storage solutions, and there is no battery big enough anyway for a whole city or even a sizable town. It's baseload, and it's where we have applied it. We have taken on the fossil fuels, such as in China. We've never had any subsidies. We've still been profitable every year since 2009, and we sell our energy slightly under the coal heating as an example. So the future is really bright here in Southeast Asia for geothermal electricity, cooling, and also heating, because there is a number of industrial processes that need significant amount of heating. And geothermal being the only renewable that is baseload. So if you think about any independent energy system of the future, a fully standalone renewable energy system, it will need a baseload backbone. And geothermal can provide that beautifully. So we call this concept Geothermal Plus, where we use geothermal as the baseload backbone, and on that we put the wind and the solar and even the waste heat solutions, and everything becomes more profitable. So remember this about geothermal. It is renewable, it is baseload, it is profitable, it provides energy security and energy stability. How can you beat that?
There we go. magic bullet. So Prashant, I think with that, looking at the experience that you have in Europe with respect to integrating renewables into systems, in particular in the Nordics, a lot of offshore wind, a lot of onshore wind. How do you see the applications of what you're doing in Europe, and in particular in the Nordics, right? Transferring over here into Asia. I mean, there's a lot of talk now on nearshore wind, obviously being developed in Vietnam, for example. Wind power itself in the Philippines has been there for a couple of decades or more. There's floating offshore that's now being discussed in both countries. How do you see that technology transfer and enablement taking place?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I take the cue from the opening remarks as well that no one believed in wind energy only some time back. I give you a couple of examples. So we did one project, Borwind 1, and I'm not mentioning the Nordics country because we have a lot of experience. 50% of the connection to renewable energy with HVDC is done by Hitachi Energy, so we have. But why I'm mentioning Borwind 1 is like in 2012 this project was completed, and it was 80 turbines, 5 megawatt, 400 megawatt of renewable energy, 125 kilometers off the coast of Germany, and we did this with TenneT. And that time, it was one of the deepest and largest renewable energy integration project. 10 years now, we have the project in Nordics with Dogger Bank A, B, and C, and this is 3.6 gigawatt. And this is 130 to 190 kilometers deep, and now it is one of the largest renewable energy integration project. So in 10 years, what Nordics and what Europe has achieved, if you look into ASEAN, just look into Vietnam. Vietnam has 3,000 kilometers of coastline, and they have the potential of 160 gigawatt, which is around 5 to 7 times the potential in Europe put together. So Vietnam alone can power whole of ASEAN. And they have been of late a trailblazer as well. So there is a tremendous potential when it comes to wind energy and integration of wind energy. Of course, there are a few challenges as well because typhoons are more common in this part of the world. You like it or not. So that brings the additional challenges. However, from the technological perspective, and then I believe we have certain supply chain also available in countries like Vietnam. China is doing 70 to 80% of the total wind energy installation in the world. Taiwan, Japan, Korea, they're coming back. ASEAN is a bit lagging behind, and there are obvious reasons because it's very difficult for them to change the energy mix because the energy security, and at the same time it is difficult to bring the capex for such a huge transformation. So the critical part, as I mentioned, integration of renewable energy would be critical together with interconnections. So the ASEAN grid, the HVDC connection between Indonesia and Singapore, those are the critical part which will secure, which will provide energy security to the countries, and then this will enable the green energy transition. Actually.
Okay, thank you for that. I think back to you, Lena. We've been talking about Neste and having a presence, obviously, in the Nordics. You've also got a presence here in Singapore. There's a lot of focus now on the transport side with respect to decarbonization. There's EVs, which is definitely part of the play, but it's not the only part of the play, right? There's hydrogen vehicles and infrastructure also coming on. And then when you start looking at aviation, you start looking into biofuels, sustainable aviation fuels and things like that. When do you see, and what do you see is sort of the play in Southeast Asia with respect to your segment, and how do you see that kind of panning out over the next 5, 10, 15? When are we going to see this happen, and how are we going to see it happen?
Well, it's happening already because these our solutions, they are readily available now. Of course, we need to work on capacities. So Singapore Airlines also has tested and successfully our SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel. So it's already there, but like I said, it is a pool of innovating new raw materials there, doing more. We are actually here in Singapore, we are having a big program investing 1.5 billion euros to expand our existing refinery. And after that, now we have a capacity of 100,000 tons of SAF. It will be 1.5 million tons after this expansion project. So it's already there, it's coming, but like said earlier, we need more. We need more capacity. Neste will expand the production, and we are aiming to have by 2030 plus something about 10 million tons capacity. But other companies are doing that too. So it is about selection, and there is a big demand. Many airlines, they are already committed to use this sustainable aviation fuel. Aviation industry has set a target there that by 2050, aviation industry is in net zero. So we are going for that. And of course, all solutions are needed, and there are a lot of research, even electrifying aviation. But while we are waiting, it's already here. Yeah.
So, I mean, one thing, just feeding off of that, what do you think are the challenges for the region with respect to being able to scale to the levels that you just mentioned?
It is, of course, many things impacting. One is, of course, the raw material pool. We are using waste and residues like used cooking oil, animal fat, those streams coming not to be able to use in the food industry anymore. So that is quite a pool we are needing. In Singapore refinery, we need that 200,000 per hour. So that is quite amount, and that is one thing we are working a lot, like increasing this pool of raw materials. So there are many options for that, long term and short term, mid term. Regulation is one, absolutely. We need these policies and regulations to, for example, stabilize this mechanism between price difference and what are actually the raw materials we can use. It can be idealistic that just certain type of waste and residues go, but to optimize this emission reduction, it should be more flexible. Many things impacting.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. We do have a bright future, I guess.
We do? Already here?
Hakor, if I may, in terms of a very similar question as well, what are sort of these enabling critical requirements that you would see, at least in the ASEAN environment, in terms of scaling up geothermal resources, just in general?
Yeah, the resources there. What is needed is more sort of a common knowledge among decision makers, city planners, how we can utilize geothermal, because in the region the knowledge is more or less concentrated in the high temperatures and making electricity, but what is lacking is knowledge about how the lower temperature can benefit cities. There is nothing as powerful when it comes to decarbonization than changing an energy heating or cooling source for a city from fossil fuels to renewables. So we need just to educate decision makers and city planners about the benefits. There is also, like Lina mentioned, there is a regulatory hurdle to be passed, because solar and wind, for example, they were given wings by public support, political support. But everybody can sort of understand solar and wind. You can see it or feel it on your skin. But geothermal is this mysterious energy that is 2 or 3 kilometers into the ground, so people don't quite understand it. But geothermal needs to, for a fast expansion, it needs to have more enabling policies. As an example, developers could be incentivized if they are using clean heat for their buildings. This is something that we know from China has been very, very successful. Knowledge and regulation. The technologies are moving very, very fast. Every year we drill deeper. We can use lower temperature to provide more cooling or more heating. And we're also learning how to use the higher temperature. Iceland has an example drilled into molten magma at 400 and something degrees, where the drill bit melted. We are still figuring out how to get that into commercial usage, but we will get there.
Well, that's very interesting. We should talk about that after this. Prashant, I think looking at what has been mentioned, regulation is part of the mix. But in terms of access to technologies, where do you think the challenge is for the region? I mean, there is potentially a knowledge gap in terms of transfer of knowledge and capabilities. You mentioned earlier on in terms of regionalization of a common sort of platform, if you will. There's the digitalization. So there's a lot of these playing at the same time to be able to, there's maybe even information overload, if you will, in terms of what these applications could be. Where do you see sort of the opportunity and the Achilles heel in that technology play to be able to actually enable this? I know it's a bit of a complicated question, but enablement in terms of a technology play in region to be able to actually unlock the benefit of decarb.
I mean, there is a misconception that technology is lagging, specific to ASEAN, but actually is the other factors which are lagging the technology. So, because for Hitachi Energy, we basically trying to facilitate the electricity providers to be zero netters, right? So we enable them to have this green energy transition. So most of our solutions are basically coming from the purpose-driven growth strategy, what we have for 2030. And it's very much implemented in ASEAN as well. So as I've mentioned in the beginning of the talk, that the first challenge we have is decarbonization. So with the decarbonization, we have introduced iconic series of products and solutions. It's very much there to be adopted. ASEAN, it will take some time because there are certain issues to adopt the technology. But with the iconic series of product, our customers are able to reduce the carbon footprint quite significantly. So from the decarbonization perspective, this is there. Then decentralization, which is integrating the renewable energy. So with HVDC Light, as we have done in Nordics countries, we have enormous potential as well as the solution capabilities available to integrate it. Then we talk about digitalization. So the good thing is that Hitachi is leading the digital front. So together with Hitachi and Hitachi Energy, we are able to provide electrical solutions from Hitachi Energy, formerly ABB, and the digital solutions from Hitachi. So this is 250 years of expertise we have to deliver the solution, which is facilitating the demand response, which is facilitating the electricity provider to overcome a lot of these complications, right? So technology is not lagging actually. specific to ASEAN. Applications are limited. However, we see that we are on the growth trajectory. We would like to see a faster growth, a faster transition towards green energy transition. However, what we really need to comprehend is the targets for the green energy. China alone, they have 0 net targets by 2060, but by 2030, the China will decarbonize equivalent to the whole US energy production. So in next 8 years, China is going to achieve what US will take 20, 30 years. So Asia is not behind actually from that perspective. And the situation changed significantly in 2015 when actually China signed the agreement, and then you see the levelized cost of transition is really, really low and affordable for ASEAN. So now is the time for ASEAN to grab it and move towards faster, greener energy transition.
Well, thanks for that. That's kind of giving us more hope as well. That's good. Yeah.
Yes.
Håkon, if I may ask you, to that point of scaling up, in the geothermal space, are you seeing new projects emerging in Asia, in Southeast Asia in particular? What's that pipeline looking like?
Yeah, well, the sort of technological advances in geothermal are not coming yet from here, but they are coming from Europe, they are coming from China. Like I mentioned, the region is sort of in a very early phase and starting to really understand what can be done with geothermal. There is a great deal of knowledge in how to generate electricity, but sort of using old-fashioned methods. But if you look at all the things that are happening in geothermal R&D, experiments with all kinds of closed-loop systems, and also what is called hot rock technology, where we don't drill to get hot liquid, but simply use the heat gradient of the earth. These things can solve for most of the energy needs of humanity. One of the questions I quite often get is there enough geothermal in the world? And I tell people that the core of the earth, which is only 4,000 kilometers under our feet, is the same temperature as the surface of the sun, 150 million kilometers away. So we are just capturing tiny little bits of this energy that the core of the earth is constantly radiating out. And I think if you ask me the same question in about 10 years, there is going to be so many new technologies that have been applied, because there is so much excitement going on, but it's still like early days. For many, many years, we simply sort of focused on getting electricity out of geothermal and very little else. But if you look at what you can do with the lower temperatures, you provide heating, you provide cooling, you keep greenhouses same temperature 24 hours a day, you have swimming pools, hot swimming pools, you have fish farming onshore. There are so many things that can be done, and we are just scratching the tip of the iceberg here.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Lena, to that point, we've got one question here that's on SAF in particular. What are the most successful pathways to securing feedstock? And when will we sort of see a competitive price for SAF in the market? Tricky.
That is a tricky one. Of course, we need mechanism for that price issue, because it's many times the fossil at the moment. Of course, varies. So mechanism for that, whatever it is, might be taxing, in raw material, I think there are available. We have calculated that 2040, the magic year, so there will be available enough. We have it all. But some of those are still like we are studying the feasibility of use those, we are studying if we can use those in the processes, and then these regulations that sort of like unlock this potential. Those feedstock materials we are not able to use because of regulations. There might be potential to unlock these. So maybe these. Of course, there will be like competition for a lot for these. But like said, they are available already, and we want to have this world like circulating stuff, using more and more these wastes, and that is actually our goal to have like 100% of those in a short term.
So you'd be looking at, in other words, I mean, feedstock would sort of drive access to different new innovations in feedstock is what's going to drive.
That's
and
true.
Regulation, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay, that kind of makes sense. Yeah. I think we've got a couple of more questions here. You mentioned several times about being able to harness power from low temperature geothermal energy. How low is low? Hot springs? What?
Yes. Well, when it comes to heating and when it comes to cooling, you only need about 90 degrees centigrade. And the sort of threshold is constantly moving down. Heating, we can work with temperatures now down to 50, 55 degrees. So, yeah. And the sky is the limit. If you want to do electricity generation, you need to do it in a sort of efficient way. You would probably need somewhere north of 120 degrees. Everything north of 130 has become ideal. But the hotter you have it, the more you can do.
Right. That makes sense as well. And those applications you were mentioning, I mean, those are all sort of they're in R&D phase?
No. If you should come to Iceland, we can take you to see all of these things, live.
You heard it.
The whole economy is powered with geothermal, and even our most popular tourist attraction is called the Blue Lagoon. People call it one of the wonders of the world. They don't realize that this is used water from a geothermal power plant that is sort of on the other side of the pool. But this is what happens when you have an environmental accident in geothermal. You just open up a spa. And by the way, Blue Lagoon is worth a multiple of the geothermal power plant behind it that touched it. So we charge tourists 50 euros, and millions of them are lining up to take a bath in geothermal wastewater every year.
And then you've got all the minerals and all that as well that you export.
Yes, you can extract all kinds of minerals from the geothermal fluid, depending on the location, but lithium is, of course, very, very popular now. But there are many ingredients that are used by the cosmetic industry as an example.
Yeah, that's right.
Because it's full of dissolved solids. You can even get gold from it if you are patient enough.
Great. Well, I think we're getting almost to time. I think before we close out, I'd like to ask one question, and if you could just answer that in about 30 seconds or so. What are the concrete recommendations you have for individuals as all of us to actually act on to be able to enable this future of transition?
Sustainability and what are the selections? We should live this sustainability. Really, whenever you make a selection, you need to think what is the impact of that. That is important for individual. And then, of course, like a society do that too. It would be nice to see not metropolis, but sustainapolis later on. So it is all about selection and exploring options.
Thank you, Lena. Okay.
Okay, what we need to do is we need to realize that we will never reach the global decarbonization goals of carbon neutrality without addressing how cities are heated and cooled. We need to transition how cities are heated to cooled to clean energy sources. Of course, geothermal is only one of them, but there are others too. We must remember that the next energy revolution is space heating or space cooling.
Thank you. And Prashant?
As an individual, the choices we make, right? So we have to be aware of, like, our choices are sustainable. The car we drive or the flight we take. As an enterprise, I feel that there is a tremendous scope to benchmark best practices, right? We can learn from each other, and this is like open dialogue. From the technological perspective, we need a strong policy framework. And that's something which is kind of a moving target now, but I believe this will help and will enable the green energy transition, right? The last bit of it would be, and this is always the case, that how critical the sustainability is for us, right? And this is not only from the companies or the technologies perspective, but how we behave as an individual, right? So for me, it's not one solution. It's like together, probably, if everyone act with the sense of urgency, then only we can achieve the green energy transition.
Thank you. Well, I think with that, we've come to a close, and please give a round of applause for the knowledge shared today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Per Krista, I think it's over. That wasn't me. Great, thank you. I think. Yeah, sure. Yeah. And thank you all for your questions as well. They were quite.
Shall we get closer?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. We should be in the back. We are there.
Thanks a lot. Very good. Excellent. Great. Good panel. Thank you. It is. Yeah, I think so. Jackie, we can just go on. Okay, my phone doesn't work. Okay. Yeah. All right. Is this phone? Yeah, it is working. Okay. Thank you very much to the panel. Great discussion. Please also know that you can continue the discussion with the companies or the panelists here after at the tables behind here. Then I'd like to introduce the closing remarks. Mr. Ambassador Eivind Homme, Ambassador of Norway, to close off this session, please. Thank you.
Yeah. Working now? I think so. Thank you so much, Per Christer, dear ambassadors, organizers, panelists, and participants here in Singapore, and those who have been following us on the Zoom. Good evening, and thank you for giving me the honor to conclude yet, I would say, another successful edition of what I would call Nordic Singaporean Green Talks, which I hope you all have benefited from. I start by thanking my good Danish colleague, Ambassador Sandra Jensen Landi, for making clear the ambitions of the Nordic region to become the most sustainable and integrated region in the world, no less. She also offered many examples of the Nordic countries' advantages within green and sustainable energy technology, as well as the benefits of a regional energy integration. We also learned a lot about what Denmark is doing, not least concerning wind power and the plans for 2 huge energy islands. Then I would like to thank the expert panel, very well led by Mr. Yatin Premchand, for sharing their insights and views of the challenges and opportunities of the energy situation in Singapore and in the Southeast Asia region. The companies that the 3 panelists represent are excellent examples of where Nordic technologies contribute within renewable energy, including in green aviation fuels to the ongoing green energy transitions in Singapore and the rest of Southeast Asia. To me, you sounded optimistic, you sounded like you have a lot of products to offer, and at the same time, you sounded realistic. And I guess that's the way we should think about this. Many thanks to Ms. Elena Matalainen of Neste of Finland, Mr. Haukur Hardarson of Arctic Green Energy of Iceland, and Mr. Prashant Mishra of Hitachi Energy. My conclusion is simply that we have much to offer each other, and that working with Singapore and companies in this region will be highly beneficial for all of us. The challenges obviously are huge, taking into consideration the immense time pressure we all are facing to simply save the world and continued economic and sustainable economic growth. Allow me to add that Norwegian companies also are active in the Asian energy markets. Equinor is a global leader on floating offshore wind and has recently established offices in Japan and in Vietnam. Companies like Ocean Sun, Scatec, and Fred Olsen Renewables are in the front on offshore floating solar, and the fertilizer company Yara is positioning itself to be a world leader on green ammonia production. Norway and Singapore are in the forefront of decarbonization in the maritime sector. The war in Ukraine was mentioned, and I would say that the also related energy situation in Europe right now has put Norway, now the largest producer of oil and gas in Western Europe and the only net exporter, in a situation where our single most important contribution, in addition to what was mentioned of transfer of electric power from hydropower, is to ensure a high and stable production from our continental shelf. But energy transition also remains urgent. We will at the same time produce more renewable energy and increase energy efficiency. Norwegian companies can play an important role in developing floating offshore wind. At home, the target is to open up areas for offshore wind power production that will generate 30,000 megawatts of power in Norway by 2040, nearly equivalent to the amount of electricity we currently produce in Norway. Prices of gas and electricity in Europe and the world, including in Singapore, is reaching unprecedented levels, which also lead to explosive electricity prices in large part of Norway, hurting industries in Europe, our trading partners, and they create social tensions in many of our societies over partners and allies. Let me just say that it's Norway's interest, also as an energy producer, that European and global energy market and prices as quickly as possible reverts to a stable and predictable state. To conclude, and on behalf of the present Nordic ambassadors, we believe in Nordic collaboration with Singaporean and Asian partners to solve the long-term challenges of sustainability and the short-term disruptions in the global and regional energy markets. We thank Innovation Norway, Business Sweden, Business Finland, Business Iceland, the Nordic Innovation House in Singapore for organizing today's Nordic talks, as well as the Nordic Council of Ministers for the funding and the support, as well as our MC, Per Christer. So, to all of you participants, thank you so much for joining us today, both here and those who are on the Zoom. Thank you.
Yeah, to the organizers was mentioned. I'd like to express a special thank to Jacqueline Chen, that has been from the Nordic Innovation House. She's been the primus motor for this event. Without her, it wouldn't be possible. So thank you so much for all the work that you put together on this one. Of course, thanking to the organizers. This has been mentioned several times. The Nordic Talk is a project under the Nordic Council of Ministers. They have been sponsoring and supporting us. And we also had a number of marketing partners. So with that, thank you for people online. And